Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Freyberg, and welcome to Lecture 18. It is grammar time. I want to take a few minutes and really just go over those grammatical issues that we all have that it's just hard to get a hold of. And we're just going to go through examples and see if we can get clear on a lot of these issues. Here we go. Okay, so which one's your nemesis? Is it sentence run-ons and fragments? Do you get a lot of notes that say you've got fragments and run-ons? Is it commas, semicolons, colons, periods, that kind of punctuation? What about verb tenses? Do you have trouble with verb tense agreement, subject-verb agreement, parallel construction? Or if these things don't mean anything to you, maybe that's an issue. What about apostrophes and capitalization? That kind of stuff. And I want you to think about how much time you actually spend editing and proofreading your sentences. Not just glancing at your screen, going bzz, 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 but actually grinding over sentences. Because that's what it takes to really get your grammar and your style correct. I've been doing this all my life, and I still spend real time kind of grinding out the grammatical stuff. All right, let's see what we can do. Let's get some examples going. Let's just start with run-on sentences. That's probably the most common error I see, and that's when a sentence tries to basically do too much. Okay, you're trying to put too many ideas in a sentence, and technically two independent clauses appear in one sentence without the proper punctuation. But basically, you're just jamming too much into a sentence, too many ideas that could live on their own as a sentence. So here's an example. The economists went to the conference. They presented recovery plans. That's a run-on. And it's a run-on because you're trying to put two sentences into one sentence. Look at this and follow the yellow dot. The economists went to the conference. That could live on its own as a sentence. The economists went. Subject, verb, and then a predicate, right? Subject, verb, and something else. So that could be a sentence on its own. And they presented recovery plans. That could be a sentence on its own. Subject, verb, and the rest. And I'm trying to join these with just this little comma. You can't shove two sentences together with just a little comma to separate them. That's like, the joke I always make is, that's like putting two sets of in-laws in the same small house. How does that work out? Not very well, right? They need more room, they need more space. Same thing with two things that could live on their own as sentences. So here's a correction. You can make two sentences. That's okay. The economists went to the conference. Period. They presented recovery plans. Period. Great. Perfectly correct. Second thing you could do is you can use a comma and what gets called a coordinating conjunction. Think of it. I mean, think of the name. It coordinates, right? It coordinates two things. So the economists went to the conference, comma, and they presented recovery plans. That coordinating conjunction and gives you the room you need. If you're going to construct a sentence this way, using a comma and a coordinating conjunction, make sure the two sides you're using are really, really dependent upon each other. It really makes sense to keep them in the same sentence and separate them with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Little note here, coordinating conjunctions, you may remember them from Scholastic Rot, and, but, or. Well, there's three more that didn't get good publicity in conjunction junction, and that's so, yet, nor, and for. So the coordinating conjunctions are and, but, or, so, yet, nor, and for. What do you notice about those? They all have three letters or fewer. You cannot be a coordinating conjunction if you have more than three letters. I don't think that was a rule when they were made up, but turns out coordinating conjunctions have three letters or fewer. So remember that as you're trying to build your sentences. And a third option is that you can use a comma and a subordinating conjunction. And that subordination tells you exactly what it's trying to do. It makes what comes after it less than a sentence. It subordinates what comes after. So the economists went to the conference, comma, where they presented recovery plans. So the first part, can live on its own as a sentence. They presented recovery plans can live on its own as a sentence. But if I want these two ideas to be part of the same sentence, I can join them with a comma and then where, which is a subordinating conjunction. It makes what comes after it less than a sentence. And you can hear it, right? If I just said to you, where they presented recovery plans, you can hear it in my voice that I want to continue, that it's not over, there's something else to come. And that's because this where has made this independent clause less than independent. And finally, our friend, the semicolon. It's actually our enemy. The semicolon is our nemesis because we tend not to use semicolons well. A semicolon is not a big comma. It's a small period. Okay. What needs to be on either side of that semicolon has to be something that could live on its own as a sentence. Semicolons break up two sentences or can join two sentences. Look at this. The economists went to the conference. That's a sentence. They presented recovery plans. Now, I could just put a period there. If I'm choosing to put a semicolon there, it's because I want to imply a very close relationship between the sentences that exist on either side of that semicolon. Hey, it's Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. There's Romeo and Juliet. They need to be together, but they could live on their own. And in some cases, say Romeo and Juliet, they probably should have lived on their own. Okay. This is how you take care of run-on sentences. Run-on sentences also happen in these kinds of cases. This is, in fact, where I see most of the run-on sentences, and they're caused by two words, therefore and however. Because what we try to do is join sentences with commas and therefores and howevers. But as you'll notice, therefore and however are neither coordinating conjunctions or subordinating conjunctions. So they don't do that kind of work. Let's read this sentence. Chemistry has contributed much to our understanding of foods. That could be a sentence. Therefore, many foods such as wheat and beans can be produced in labs. Many foods such as wheat and beans can be produced in labs. Could be a sentence on its own. I have joined two sentences, and I've tried to make therefore be a coordinating conjunction or a subordinating conjunction, and it's neither. It's not a coordinating conjunction because it has more than 3 letters. And it's not a subordinating conjunction because it doesn't make what comes after it less than a sentence. I could say, therefore, many foods such as wheat and beans can be produced in labs. And that's a sentence. It's not less than a sentence. So therefore, doesn't subordinate anything. Now I've just got 2 sentences in a sentence, and that's a run-on. And look at this. It doesn't even have to be long to be a run-on. Some laboratory foods taste good. However, they are not nutritious. Some laboratory foods taste good could be a sentence. They are not nutritious. That could be a sentence. I'm trying to join 2 sentences. Can I do that with however? Is however a coordinating conjunction? No, it has more than 3 letters. Is it a subordinating conjunction? No, because it doesn't make what comes after it less than a sentence. Listen to this. However, they are not nutritious. That's a sentence. There's nothing subordinating about it. So I have 2 run-ons here because I've tried to use therefore and however in inappropriate ways. Here's a correction. Chemistry has contributed much to our understanding of foods, period. Many foods, such as wheat and beans, can be produced in labs, period. Some lab foods taste good, comma, but they are not nutritious. Join this one with a coordinating conjunction. It's a coordinating conjunction because it has 3 letters. And, but, or, so, yet, nor, for. Okay. By the way, for those of you who want to, any of these practice buttons will take you to exercises online that will help you practice whatever's being showcased on this slide. Okay, so if you want to work on run-on sentences, work to eliminate them, you can go practice here. Okay. Your red flag warning words are always therefore and however. If I had to guess, I would say at least 3/4 of the run-on sentences I've seen over the last 30 years have been because of therefores and howevers being used to try to join independent clauses. Okay. It's not a bad idea in your work as you're trying to look for run-on sentences to just do a Control F on therefores and howevers and go to that spot and see if you're creating run-ons. Now, the opposite, in a way, of a run-on is a sentence fragment, right? That's less than a sentence. So here's an example of a fragment. Although the entrepreneur submitted the business proposal to the incubator hub, you can hear it, right? There's more, but wait, there's more, and I'm not hearing it. Now, watch what happened here. If I had just said the entrepreneur submitted the business proposal to the incubator hub, we're all good. Subject, verb, the rest. But what did I do? I added although, and although is a subordinator. All right, it makes what comes after it less than a sentence. So what was a sentence becomes less than a sentence, even though I added a word. I added a subordinator. Here's a correction. Just get rid of that subordinating conjunction. The entrepreneur submitted the business proposal to the incubator hub. Good. Now, if you want to keep the although in there, that's fine, but then you have to build it into a sentence. So we have, although the deadline had passed, the entrepreneur submitted the business proposal to the incubator hub. Although the deadline had passed is less than a sentence. It's a dependent clause. It's depending on something else. The entrepreneur submitted the business proposal to the incubator hub could live on its own as a sentence. So it's okay. It can take on a little subordinating clause. And here we go. So that's two ways to fix it. Watch out for sentence fragments with these warning words. Although, while, when, because. They usually subordinate what comes after and turns your beautiful sentence into less than a sentence, into a sentence fragment. A little more on sentence fragments. And again, as you see, you can practice here. Running down the hall and into the office. Now, that's a sentence fragment because there's no subject. Who's running? We don't know. Who's doing the verb? What's doing the verb? I don't know. Something needs to be doing the verb. There's nothing doing the verb here. It's a fragment. Okay, the entrepreneur went running down the hall and into the office. Great. That's the subject. That's the verb. Now I'm happy. That's the rest. Subject, verb, the rest. Here's another correction. The entrepreneur tripped while running down the hall into the office. Now you'll see if you just have the words running while running down the hall into the office, that's less than a sentence. We need a subject and we need a verb. Subject, entrepreneur, verb, tripped. The entrepreneur tripped while running down the hall into the office. You can practice here. And I think one thing you'll notice already in the way I talk about a lot of grammar stuff and style stuff, I try to stay away from the vocabulary and the diction that just, it's just hard. We don't know. It's subordinating, coordinating. I'll name them, but I really want to try to talk about this stuff in ways that make sense, because we have to donate the time to try to figure this stuff out and get our sentences correct so that they're going to have impact on our readers. Here's some more sentence fragment stuff. Sentence fragment is an incomplete sentence. Okay, and here's a little sidebar. Subordinating conjunctions make what comes after them less than a sentence. We talked about this, right? You need to make sure you have an independent clause to hold up that subordinating clause. Here are some common subordinating conjunctions. Watch for these. Watch that they're not making your sentences less than sentences. Okay? Okay, how about some punctuation? There's your little punctuation joke for you. Remember that commas save lives. Periods separate independent clauses. Semicolons also separate independent clauses or sentences. But you want to imply a very strong relationship between those independent clauses. So semicolons are like little periods. Colons can separate independent clauses when the stuff after it tries to explain the stuff before it. We're going to go through this, don't worry. And commas separate items in a list. They separate independent and dependent clauses, non-restrictive clauses, and introductory phrases. What? Try to explain, okay? And I'll try to explain in just clear language. We'll see what we can come up with lots of examples. Periods. They separate independent clauses. How about this? The pizza was delivered in record time. It was steaming hot, but still crispy. This is a sentence. And then this is a sentence. We've separated them with a period. Economist Gabriel Alvarez writes extensively on entrepreneurship in Peru. Period. Sentence. Her latest article focuses on the top projects to emerge from the Atlas Innovation Hub in Lima. Period. 2 sentences. Let them live as sentences. Perfectly fine. If you want to try work with semicolons, and let me tell you, if you're the person who just says, hey, you know, semicolons, I don't understand them, then don't use them. Okay? Just don't use them. They're not big commas. They have to separate independent clauses. So here's Cucina Brava, prides itself on the quality of its Neapolitan origins. Clearly, when I wrote this lecture, I was hungry. The chefs use only fresh ingredients from Italy for all their recipes. I could have used a period. These could be 2 completely different sentences. Absolutely. But I wanted to imply that strong relationship between these independent clauses. Okay, they're snuggling, they're together. So I can use a semicolon because it's about the pride of Cucina Brava, and then I talk about what the chefs use. They kind of illustrate that pride. And how about our economist, Gabriel Alvarez, writes extensively on entrepreneurship in Chile. In fact, her career began at the Atlas Innovation Hub in Lima in the early 2000s. Okay, so again, both sides think the words on both sides of that semicolon could live on their own as their own sentences, but I'm implying a relationship. Okay, so Alvarez writes on entrepreneurship in Chile. Oh, actually, her career began at the Innovation Hub she's going to be talking about. Fascinating. Those sentences, those independent clauses are very involved in each other. Use a semicolon. Again, you can use a period, not a problem. If you're going to use a semicolon, use it intentionally. Colons. Now, a colon is used to set up an illustration or to set up a list. They're not little periods, they're not big commas, they're kind of their own beast. So, let's go back to Cucina Brava. My friends Skippy and Dippy have favorite pizzas at Cucina Brava. Well, what are their favorite pizzas? Let me give you the list. The Margherita and the Marina. Okay? The colon sets up the list of answers. The leadership degree was wildly popular, colon. Fall classes were full by early summer. Now this is different. This isn't setting up a list, it's setting up an explanation. The leadership degree was wildly popular? Oh, was it? How do you know? Well, fall classes were full by early summer. That's a little trickier use of a colon. And you could use a period here. They're 2 separate sentences. It's fine. You could even use a semicolon. They're 2 separate sentences. It's fine. But this is a trickier usage, and it is a good usage though. If you want to practice with colons, go here. Now we get to the most abused form of punctuation, and that is the comma. We tend to just sprinkle them in our writing. Or if we pause as we're typing, we throw a comma in there, right? Okay, that's probably not good usage. They are not little rest stops sprinkled into a sentence. Okay. Let's look at how commas do get used. Okay. They are used after an introductory phrase. And like the introductory phrase here is in red. After the game, comma, the couple went home. You'll notice that the introductory phrase is not a complete sentence. After the game, blah, blah, blah. In 1976, blah, blah, blah. You'll notice what's after the comma in an introductory phrase is a sentence, or is an independent clause that could live on its own as a sentence. In the absence of research on the subject, blah, 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 blah. And you can even hear it in your voice. After the game, you can feel the comma. Okay, so introductory phrases require commas. You can use a comma to create room for non-restrictive clauses. What's a non-restrictive clause? It's basically a little extra information you want to add to the sentence that will help the reader, but the sentence doesn't need it. So you have to create a little room for them. So here we have a sentence. I'm going to read it without the stuff in red. The stuff in red is the non-restrictive clause. So I'm going to read it without the red. The student decided to join the Redlands cohort. Lovely sentence. You know what? There's a little extra information I want to add to that. So in order to do that, you'll see we have commas there and comma there. There's a comma on each side of that non-restrictive clause. I kind of think of them as little little like bookends that kind of push open the sentence and hold the rest of the sentence apart so I can slip in this little bit extra information, right? A little bit extra information, who hailed from Riverside, is slipped in. The commas create the space for that. And here's the trick. You know you need those double commas if you can read the sentence without that clause and it still makes sense. The student decided to join the Redlands cohort. Perfect. I need a little extra information. I'm going to use those setting off commas to create the room for the non-restrictive clause. I'm going to shove that little bit of information in there, and I have a beautiful sentence. The student who hailed from Riverside decided to join the Redlands cohort. Let's do the second sentence. The job was sought after by many. However dirty it may seem to be, is the extra information I want to add in there, the non-restrictive clause. So in order to do that, I need a comma and a comma to create the room for that extra information to come into that sentence. The job, however dirty it seemed to be, was sought after by many. One more example. Again, the non-restrictive clause is in red, so it needs commas on either side to create room for it to be in the sentence. The class on the history of economics is scheduled for spring semester. I want to add who's teaching it, so I bring that non-restrictive clause, I put commas around it, and then I can insert it into the sentence. With the non-restrictive clause inserted, I should be able to read the sentence, leave it out, and the sentence still makes sense. The class on the history of economics is scheduled for spring semester. Okay. It works. What often happens in these kinds of situations is maybe one comma gets shoved in there, but the other comma is left out, and it gets really confusing to read. More commas. Use commas to list items in a series. This one's probably very familiar to you. She hit, here's the series, 2 home runs, comma, 1 single, comma, and a double in last week's game. Now, this is what gets called the use of the Oxford comma. You could leave that other comma out, this final comma, but I have to say, I'm a fan of the Oxford comma. It eliminates confusion in a lot of situations, so that's why I tend to use it. How about this one? He made 1A, comma, 2 Bs, comma, and 1 C last semester. The following was included at the dinner. Now notice there's a colon because I'm setting up a list. And to separate items in that list, we use commas. Stuffed grape leaves, eggplant lasagna, scalloped potatoes, and blackberry cobbler. Yes, I'm hungry. Still with the commas. Okay, you use commas to separate two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction, which we talked about at the beginning, right? But we talked more about the coordinating conjunction and not the comma. Coordinating conjunctions need commas. Dinner was lovely, but it was a shame that Bobby didn't make it, comma, but. Commas are great, yet we use them in the wrong places, comma, yet. Businesses depend on economic conditions, so we ought to understand economic trends, comma, so. Comma, coordinating conjunction, comma, coordinating conjunction, comma, coordinating conjunction. There's a culture club joke in there I just can't find right now. Okay. You would also use commas to separate dependent and independent clauses. That's using those subordinating conjunctions. Basically, anytime you're using a conjunction of any sort, you're going to have commas nearby. Although he worked hard at his job, comma, the company let him go. Because the humidity was so elevated, comma, the game had to be canceled. While she was eating dinner, comma, the dogs jumped into her lap. Okay, in this case, you can hear the commas. You have the subordinating conjunction, and at the end of that clause, you need a comma to introduce the independent clause, or what could have lived on its own as a sentence. If you want to practice, you go right here. Verb tenses and consistency of verb tenses. I have a problem. I switch verb tenses a lot when I shouldn't, so I need to save time to really go through my work and my writing and make sure I'm being consistent. Let's put it this way. If you start in the present tense, you need to stay there. If you start in the past tense, you need to stay there. MLA, as a documentation system, tends to encourage writing in the present tense. APA tends to encourage writing in the past tense. It doesn't matter. What matters is you don't flip around all the time, confusing people. So here's something that's confusing. Economist Gabriel Alvarez explains the process of growing an innovation hub to would-be entrepreneurs who asked questions. Well, wait a minute. If she's explaining it now, they asked questions before, I don't know what's happening. I'm confused. Are they there? Are they not there? Did they submit questions beforehand and she's answering them now? Are they in the room? Are they not in the room? Are they on a Zoom call? I don't know. And that happened simply because I messed around with verb tenses. I started shifting. And then I confused the reader. And once you confuse the reader, it's over. So I decided to go here. We're just going to go past tense. Economist Gabriel Alvarez explained the process of growing an innovation hub to would-be entrepreneurs who asked questions. Feel better now. I'm not confused about who's where. Okay, past tense, past tense. Don't flip them around without reason. Here's another thing I have trouble with. Subject-verb agreement. I know the rules, right? Subjects need to agree with verbs. If there's one subject, the verb is singular. If there's more than one subject, the verb is plural. But for some reason, when I'm writing, I mess them all up. So I need to take time at the end of my drafting and really work on getting my subject verbs to agree. Here's some examples. Skippy or Dippy are enjoying both pizza and lasagna. That's a mess. Subjects and verbs don't agree. These are all examples of subjects and verbs that don't agree. Everyone eating pizza and lasagna are happy. The group of students are devouring the pizza. Even if you think the first two sound weird, the third one you're thinking, that sounds fine, right? No, let's look at them. We said Skippy or Dippy, this or that. So the verb is singular, is. If I had said Skippy and Dippy, then it would be are, because it's plural. Everyone is happy, right? Everyone is happy. Not, you would never say everyone are happy. You could say all the people there are happy, because that would be plural. This is one of those weird ones. Okay. What's the subject in the group of students devouring the pizza? It's the group, not students. It's the group. The group is devouring the pizza. The group is devouring the pizza. So in order to get your subjects and verbs to agree, you have to be able to identify how many subjects there are. And then let the verb correspond. If you want to practice, go ahead right here. Parallel construction. I think we're getting towards the end. I know this is a long one. Hope you've taken a break if you need to. Okay, when you have lists of items, you have to construct the sentence in parallel form. And I'll show you what that means. So let's go back to Skippy and Dippy at the Cucina Brava. Now they're enjoying a bunch of things, right? They're enjoying margarita pizza, lasagna, and Aperol spritzes. I'm very envious of Skippy and Dippy right now. But the way this is written is very confusing. So they're at the Cucina Brava. They're enjoying the margarita pizza. They ordered, wait, we already have subjects. So they ordered the lasagna seems weird. Plus it's a different tense. And what are they doing with the Aperol spritzes? Are they enjoying them or they ordered them? What did they, there's no parallelism. So I want you to think of it this way. Skippy and Dippy are at Cucina and Brava enjoying this, that, and the other thing. Whatever's in the list. And then you can build your sentence around that. Skippy and Dippy are at Cucina Brava enjoying, and then, so they are enjoying the margarita pizza. Skippy and Dippy are at Cucina Brava enjoying the lasagna. Skippy and Dippy are at Cucina Brava enjoying Aperol spritzes. You need to be able to read the sentence, the beginning there, and then jump to whatever it is in your list, and it still makes grammatical sense, right? So that means they're in a parallel construction. You're not using a verb here, a noun there, this here, that there, and it's all a mess. No, you need to be able to read this part of the sentence and then jump to any of the ones on the list and have it make sense. If I tried to do that up here, look at the kind of mess we'd get into. Skippy and Dippy are at Cucina Brava enjoying they ordered the lasagna. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, that's a hard one to work on. And it shows up a lot when people are building presentation slides. You get a lot of lousy parallel construction. So you can practice here. As we near the end, let's do a minute on apostrophes. Okay, they are not used well nowadays, but let's see what we can do. They usually signal possessive. Okay, you don't use apostrophes to make something plural. So an entrepreneur has a proposal, possesses a proposal, so that entrepreneur gets an apostrophe S. Two companies have 1,000 employees combined, becomes the company's 1,000 employees. Now look at that, there's only an apostrophe, And actually, there was an apostrophe S, but the word, the plural version of company, companies, already ends in an S, so I don't need the second S. So it just needs an apostrophe. Again, it's signaling possession. What does it possess? 1,000 employees. The children have a game. The children possess a game, so the children get an apostrophe S. We use apostrophes to also signal contractions when we're contracting two words. So did not becomes didn't. Have not becomes haven't. You probably won't use these contractions too much in academic writing, but we use them all the time in all sorts of writing. So just wanted to cover that for a second here. And we'll continue. Obviously, you can practice down here. Pop quiz. What does this mean? It means it is. It's a contraction for it is. So if you write IT apostrophe S, you should be able to substitute the words instead, it is. If you can't, don't use the contraction because it's meaning the wrong thing. What's this? That is the only thing that indicates possession without an apostrophe. Because English, right? So the computer has its glitches. It's just ITS. What's this? Nothing. It's nothing. Don't use it. It doesn't exist. What's that? What on earth is that? What are we doing to avocados? Oh my goodness. That's just, oh, no, just don't do that. What is that? What's that? If it was WHO apostrophe S, you should be able to say who is. It's a contraction. That's nothing. This I see all the time. We're trying to say multiple Sundays, every Sundays, many, many, many Sundays, plural Sundays. There's no apostrophe in plurals. It should just be SUNDAYS. One Sunday, multiple Sundays. Stop that. Okay. Practice. This stuff needs practice. I know apostrophes are becoming obsolete in English until they do. And they will, and that's okay. But until they do, don't risk confusing your reader, okay? Capitalization. What words do you capitalize the first letters of and which don't you? Proper nouns, names of places, titles, months, holidays, those kinds of things. You don't just capitalize words that seem important. Here's an example. Poppy Popover is the manager of the processing department at Nifty Products, which is headquartered in Tottenham, England. She's the director of operations for the company globally. So, Poppy Popover is someone's real name. Probably not. There's probably no one called Poppy Popover in the world. But in this case, this is her name. So, names get capitalization. Is the manager. Doesn't get capitalized. It's not a title. They're just the manager, right? It's not manager of operations. Like that's a title. This is just a position. It's just manager of the processing department. It's not the department of processing. That would get capitalized. It's just the processing department. Nifty Products. Now that's the name of the company. It gets capitalized. Which is headquartered in Tottenham, England. Those are places that you can find on a map. They get capitalized. Now, this is her official title, Director of Operations. So that gets capped. It's an official title. Manager. The company has 87 managers. You wouldn't capitalize the M because it's just, there's 87 managers. That's not the title. The title is Director of Operations for the company globally. And again, I'm not naming the company, it's just the company globally. These are not titles of anything. So you capitalize proper nouns, and that's the kind of stuff we mean by proper nouns. You can practice here. Here's a second one. Last February, select University of Redlands students went to Trieste, Italy, to do a consultancy project with a wine exporter who was seeking to expand operations. February is the name of a month, so yes, it gets capitalized. U of R is the name of a university, so it gets caps. Students, as many students, just no. Trieste, Italy is a place, it gets capped. A consultancy project, one of a bunch of consultancy projects. It's not the name, the proper name of the consultancy project. It's not the name of the course. So no caps. A wine exporter. There are many, many wine exporters. Okay, so it's just small letters. Who was seeking to expand operations. And again, we're not detailing a specific title of an operation. So it's a small O. Don't just capitalize a word because you think it's important. It has to be a proper noun. Practice, practice, practice. And I will spend a moment here giving you a technique to really proofread your work. I call it the real proofread test. And what you do here is you have to, and I know that, think it's 1985, okay? And you're going to print out your paper if you can, if you're able to. Really print it out. Get it off your screen. Read it out loud so that someone 10 feet away from you can hear you. Read exactly what's written and obey your grammar and punctuation as you've written it. So if there's a comma, you pause a little bit. If there's no punctuation, you just keep going. Read what's written on the page. And if you need to mess it up a little bit, because our brains will fill in the errors so that we don't even notice them. So one way to break up the narrative is to start with the last paragraph and then do the next to last paragraph and then do the next to last paragraph. And then you kind of break up that narrative roll you can get going on. You know, when you're looking at your screen and you're going and you see no errors. You see no errors because your brain is filling in all the corrections, but the corrections don't make it to your page. So you can start with the last paragraph and then move backwards in your paper. And if you can't print it out, that's okay. At least do the start backwards technique. Read what's literally there. You will hear stuff you never knew was there. Okay? And you can practice proofreading techniques here. If you want to talk about ensuring correct usage, why does this matter? I think this is why this matters. Yeah, language changes. Of course it changes. It's a living, breathing entity, and it has changed over the years, and it will continue to change. And there's dialects and regionalisms, and everything changes, and there's cultural grammars, and absolutely, absolutely, everything's in flux and everything's moving. But when you have to articulate to an audience, you need to make sure your message is clear. Don't let stuff get in the way. Don't give people a chance to dismiss your amazing efforts. So you want to make things as tight and clear and as on point as you can. And here's our recap. We went over run-on sentences and fragments. We went over periods, semicolons, colons, and commas, verb tenses, subject-verb agreement, parallelism, apostrophes, and capitalization. And here are some resources for you. I've included a bunch of links for you to go practice at. But I also want to highlight very much Grammar Girl. Grammar Girl has not only a great book, but an amazing podcast. You can listen to that podcast and learn so much. I listen to it all the time. I learn so much. It's fun, and um, you just learn a ton. So that takes us to the end of grammar time. We'll just keep at this stuff, get our work as tight and effective as possible, and I will see you next time.